Hey everybody, welcome to High Lord Tamerlane's Obscurities in Literature. And I don't mean like actual literature, but like, good and proper nerdy literature. And it's in English this time. So today we have part of the Michael Moorcock library. Michael Moorcock, you probably are most familiar with his Elric stories, but he's written countless other fantasy, sci-fi, and detective ones as far as I know. But this is the Chronicles of Hawkmoon. This is volume 1, the history of the Runestaff, which is basically what the whole epic is about. But this is the first half of it, and this is by James Cawthorn. Cawthorn was a good friend of Moorcock, and as far as I know, this is one of the very first comic book graphic novels, I'll make that distinction, that was published in the early 70s. Now, as I said, this is part of the Cawthorn collection. He did do a volume 2 of the Chronicles of Hawkmoon, but he also did at least one Elric graphic novel, if I'm not mistaken. There might be more, but I know Titan Comics are the ones that are responsible for this. They've put out a few other books you can see here down at the bottom. You can take a look at their website or your favorite purveyor of fine comic literature to take a look for some of these. The Quorum stuff is of interest if you've never seen it, just for the fact that it has early Mike Mignola artwork in it, and it's quite unique. So anyway, speaking of unique, the Chronicles of Hawkmoon. So all I was familiar with Hawkmoon was the fact that it was a post-apocalyptic adventure in a war-torn, mutated, barren Europe. So that's about all I knew going in. And I will take you guys on a trip with me to Europe. So you can see here we have the world of the Dark Empire. I don't want to get into too many details of the story. We'll let you guys discover that. There is an introduction from Byrne Hogarth here. We're going to skip that. But we do want to take a look at the few pages that exist of a hypothetical Princess of Mars comic that James Cawthorn thought about doing. Anyway, here you can see the original cover of the book. And one thing that I really enjoyed about this, it's funny, there's a lot of these big 2-page spreads as you go through the book. And it's funny because it really shows off its literary roots, I think, in this sense. And you see a lot of this very stiff panel work early on. I'm just going to skip through a couple of these pages. Lots of nice line work, and the panels themselves are quite detailed. There's a lot to really pick out, especially when you get to big epics like this, and there's quite a few of those throughout the book. So it's funny that it feels very by the number routine, very traditional paneling, but then as the story progresses and goes on, you start to see a lot more experimentation with things happening inside of panels and really kind of changing up how the page looks. And again, you have these really epic big double page spreads, and I think the size of this book really does it justice. And the action scenes are quite nice. The writing, I thought, was kind of stiff. It does improve, I thought, as it goes, but it has a lot of exposition, especially early on, and not a lot of explanation as to what's going on. But there is plenty of the action. And I mean, it really is just a nice book to pour over and take a good look at as I knock it off the stand here. One sec. There we go. Got things a bit more stable. So we actually have two parts of this graphic novel, and the second half of it, I think, is when things really start to get more interesting, both in terms of story, in terms of what you see happening, in terms of how the book itself is paced. There's just a lot better feeling, and I think it's probably as Cawthorn gets more comfortable with what's going on and how to present it. And again, you just have these really crazy, epic fight scenes. And I think in these kinds of cases, that black and white line work really works well. You can tell he was just having a lot of fun illustrating this. Overall, I enjoyed it. I gotta say, even though it was a bit stilted at the beginning, it did grow on me. And there's just a lot of funky stuff going on in this book. You can just see, yeah. But again, this is only the first half. So while there are 2 books in it, I have not had a chance to acquire the second yet. And they've got a little bit about Cawthorn, not Hawthorne. Thinking Nathaniel Hawthorne, that's not the right person, but anyway. Going back on his involvement with the sci-fi and fantasy literature world, especially in England. And then, like we said, we got a bunch of the samples of stuff. Cornelius, that's it. I can't remember the dude's name. I have had a chance to check out those. If you haven't seen the Elric books that Titans put out by the French team, it looks really nice. They're quite enjoyable. So yeah, definitely an interesting book. You don't see a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff, especially from this time and era, and it's interesting that it has more of a Tolkien-esque look to it rather than the typical Mad Max that would come around in the next 10 years after this was published. So this is an early 70s work. It kind of feels it. It would have been cool to see more colored artwork like this throughout the book, and I'm always a bit bummed when I found out that they're just wearing masks. It would have been much cooler to have them actually have giant, animal heads and stuff. But there is plenty of craziness in this, which is something that I always enjoy, and the artwork really is something to take your time and enjoy, especially after you've read it, because it does read pretty quickly. So, if you're in the mood for something different, I will put a link down below to Titan's webpage, and like I said, if you have your comic shop of choice that you like to go with, by all means, do yourself a favor and take a look for these. Hopefully you found this interesting, and hopefully I will be back with more obscurities in literature soon. This has been High Lord Tamerlane, saying thanks for watching. We'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.